Hi, in this little video I want to show you how I made this desk. Before we get started, let me explain to you why it looks the way it does. So when my wife and I suddenly had to work from home, the only place we could do this from was the sleeping room, and so I wanted the desk to be two things. One is, in the evening everything should fit in nice large drawers, so that there's no computers standing around, no paper laying around. The other thing I wanted is to have a design that resembles some design element in the room, and that was that we live in a house which is insulated with straw bales and then plastered with clay, and we have all these nice round corners, and so I measured the radius of these and then based the design of the desk on this radius. And now let's get started. Apart from the drawers, the whole desk is made from one sheet of 18mm birch plywood. Here I'm marking spots that aren't looking so good to decide which part of the piece of plywood I want to use for the desk. Then I'm marking the different pieces, some of which go into the CNC, some of which are just 2 cm wide pieces for the side panels. I cut out the pieces on the table saw and I do a rough cut before I cut it to final size, because dealing with such a big piece is not that easy. I lay out the strips to see if I have everything. Since the cutting of the pieces on the CNC takes so long, as soon as I have a piece ready, I put it on the CNC and then I can work on everything else while the CNC is running. Total running time was more than 12 hours and I cut it into 4 pieces so that I can have it run for 3 hours straight. While the CNC is running, I can start sanding all the smaller pieces and then lay them out and glue them together. And I cut these to rough size only, and later when they're glued together then I cut them to final size and get nice clean edges. Here I'm gluing together the front panels of the drawers, and as soon as these are ready and while the CNC is still running, I can start making the drawers. After all the strips were glued together, I still had time while the CNC was running to then cut the tabletop to its final size. And after that I cut the different front and side panels to their size and laid them out on the table to just see if I had made any mistakes. Whenever a piece on the CNC was finished, I took it off and then had to clean all the edges of these pieces. What you see here is all the small pieces that go together to make up a leg, and then 2 pieces that go on top of each other that will make up half of one of the sides of the table. And you'll understand in a minute how this will all go together. Once the CNC is finished, you can start gluing everything up. And here I'm gluing up the side pieces of the desk, and these are again made up of 4 layers. And what I'm doing here is putting all 4 layers on top of each other and gluing them up at once. And I would recommend, that's what I did with the second part, to do this in 2 steps. Glue 2 and 2 together and then wait until they're dry and then glue those 2 pieces together. That makes it much easier to handle. With the fronts of the drawers finished, I could start making the drawers. And I just used biscuit joints. The drawers will sit on sliders, and these sliders need to be attached to the bottom of the table. And that's why I'm attaching 4 pieces of plywood, of thinner plywood, to the side pieces. Now it was time to put everything together, so I laid it all out, marked where I wanted the biscuit joints to go, then cut the slots for the biscuit joints, and piece by piece dry fitted everything. And once I had everything done and cut out, I dry fit everything at once, including the drawers that I put in, and had a really good look if there was enough space for the drawers and if everything was as it was supposed to be. And then I take everything out and I can start gluing piece by piece together. So it's really important to take your time in these steps, because if you do anything wrong here, it'll be very difficult to take it apart again. The next step is to put in the legs, and first you need these L-shaped leg supports, which are leftovers from the CNC cutting. And I round over the edges because otherwise it won't really fit. Once that's done, I'm marking out where I need to cut them and just cut them on a track saw. And I decided I want detachable legs, and this is why I did these little biscuits with a T-nut in the back, and I glued these onto the table, and then I can attach the legs with one screw. It doesn't look like one screw would be enough, but because the leg support fits very snug into these recesses, it's actually a very strong connection. Now comes the fun part, where you actually get to build up the legs. And very important is that the first piece doesn't get glued onto the table itself, but only to the leg support. And after that, I put glue on everything and glued them piece by piece. And I used a hammer to hammer them down, and I used a clamp in many of them to really get them snug onto the leg support. And this is long, but it's a very rewarding activity. Here I'm attaching drawer slides to the drawers, and I would recommend to get some high quality drawer slides, especially some where you can later adjust them in height and in from side to side, because this will ensure that the drawers look really centered in the piece in the end. This next step I would do differently in the future, and I've included this as a cutout in the CNC file. So these are small corners that go onto the legs. And the way I did it here was to cut out round pieces and then on the table saw sort of make the corner pieces. But it would be much better to do this on the CNC. Now it's time to attach these corners, and because I wanted detachable legs, I'm attaching them only to the leg itself, not to the table top. And I tried with clamps at first, but it's much easier to do this with a tape. To cut the tabletop round, I used a Japanese saw to get them roughly round, and then a router with a flush trim bit to get them really precise. After that, it was time to round over all the edges, and first I did the big edge on the tabletop and used a large diameter bit on these. and after that I used a smaller diameter on everything else. One thing I didn't film was that I added strips of plywood next to the leg supports to make the legs a little stronger. Then it was time to sand everything. I used a belt sander, but on the round pieces I would recommend to do it by hand, because once you use a strong tool you'll never get it round again. Final step was to oil the desk. I use linseed oil because I don't like to have varnish on it in the sleeping room, but you can do this in any way that you want. Here you see the result, and I have to say I'm really happy with it, and I hope you liked this video.